You are not unfunctional. So if you work a desk job 9 to 5, or if you have a training program that's very much focused on just mirror muscles, maybe you can't touch your toes, maybe you can't get into a deep squat, then you might have been led to believe that you're unfunctional. The truth is though that you're actually highly functional. There's no such thing as someone who's unfunctional. Humans are adaptoids, and you have simply adapted to the lifestyle that you lead. The range of motion and the neural connections that you don't use, they've atrophied over time, making you a highly efficient typing machine. But the Bioneer is not about making functional people, it's about making super functional people. So a super functional person is someone who's capable of doing things that they're probably never going to need to be able to do. You get the idea, it's being ready for anything, like Batman. But the problem comes when you go from that sedentary lifestyle, or perhaps a training regime that only focuses on mirror muscles and isolation movements, to something designed to make you more functional. When you do that, that's when you either don't see the progress that you were hoping for, or you run into injuries. That's what this video is for. If you have no experience in the gym, then this is where you start out on your journey to being built like Batman. At the same time though, I hope it will also have use for people who perhaps have run into a rut in their own training, got into bad habits, and maybe aren't seeing the progress that they want to, or perhaps are experiencing limited range of motion and aches and pains. So my recommendation for absolute beginners, or for someone trying to go back to basics, is to start with very lightweight, high repetition exercises using isolation movements predominantly. So that means single joint or just a couple of joints are involved. An example would be bicep curls for about 15 to 20 reps, tricep push downs, lat pull downs, press ups maybe. These exercises are simple, so you can't injure yourself by using poor movement patterns, very easily anyways. And by using those high rep ranges, we're doing a few different interesting things. First of all, we're flooding the muscles with blood and metabolites, causing metabolic stress, and this will lead to growth. And that's important because if you want to stick to a training program, you want to see progress early on. This will help with your adherence. At the same time, all that blood flow, all of that pump work is going to help to fuel the tendons and encourage them to grow stronger and recover thicker and more powerful. This is important because muscle grows stronger quicker than does tendon. So you could expect to see structural changes in your muscle after just 8 days of training. But you won't see the same thing happen in your tendons until 2 months. So a common issue that leads to injury is if someone gets really strong really quick and then they pile a lot of weight on and then they can lift it, but their tendons give out. So by doing this pump work, by doing high repetition, low weight for about 2 months before you get into anything more complicated, you can build yourself that foundation, get strong enough, get stronger tendons so you don't cause yourself an injury later on as you get more advanced. Next, we're going to look at mobility. So I mentioned in the introduction that one of the big problems a lot of people have with their training when they're starting out is that they lack the mobility to perform the movements they need to perform. There's a difference between mobility and flexibility. So flexibility is the ability to get into any position in any way you like. So you can use an external force, maybe pushing against a wall, using a band. Mobility, on the other hand, is your ability to get into that position without any external assistance. Flexibility and mobility are both important, and of course they'll help each other. With so many people spending long amounts of time sitting, it's really common for mobility to be really poor. When you're typing at a computer, you're shortening your hip flexors, you're lengthening and weakening your glutes, you've got rounded shoulders coming forwards, and what actually happens is the muscles that are being shortened in this position that you're holding for hours and hours on end get tighter, and that becomes their resting position. And consider that a lot of people can't even get into a deep squat without going up on their tiptoes. So how can you train like Batman? How can you squat with a heavy weight when you can't even get into a deep squat? So we need to fix that. Fortunately, there are a lot of things we can do in order to improve our mobility and our flexibility as we start our training journey. So like I say, there's crossover between flexibility and mobility, so that's one of the places to start, improve your flexibility. You can check out the video that Grant made for the channel, but basically this is going to involve holding static stretches for about 30 seconds, that tends to be the recommended amount of time, following a workout. These don't go at the start of the workout, they go after you've lifted the weights. Your body will fight you as it gets into those positions as it's trying to prevent you from injuring yourself. So you want to convince your body that it's fine, you need to relax. Try and relax the muscles and get into a state of calm, get comfortable in that stretched position. So don't go too far, just go far enough that you feel the stretch and then relax there, hang out there. This is recommended by Pavel Tsatsouline, author of Relax into Stretch. But you should also be focusing on mobility itself, and this can go into your workouts, and the way I recommend doing that in particular is by using very light weights and then performing movements like the squat, like the deadlift, and watching yourself as you go through those movements to try and see where there are problems. Kelly Starrett, author of Become a Supple Leopard, talks about using training as a form of diagnostics tool. using it to see where your mobility issues lie. You can record yourself and watch it back, for instance, or just feel where there's not quite that range of motion or where there's a bit of pain or resistance. And then this way you can focus on improving that mobility before you pile the big heavy weights on. Doing this as well as the flexibility work is important because there are other factors involved in mobility other than just your flexibility, such as your muscle control, your ability to relax muscle, and strength. Your muscles need to be strong enough to push or pull you into that position. Eccentric isometrics can also be really useful. This means getting into that position and then adding some kind of weight. Similar are weighted stretches, which I did a whole video on and I recommend you check out. You can hold a kettlebell whilst in a low goblet squat position, etc. I'm going to be coming back to mobility very soon when I do the Nightwing training part 4. Closely linked to your mobility is your core stability. A lack of core strength can also result in corrective movement patterns, such as hyperextension during the squat, and this is going to make it more difficult. You don't have that solid scaffolding to then move freely as you're designed to be able to do. Practicing exercises like the hollow body, which I described in the previous Nightwing video, can make a big difference. So of course we're going to incorporate lots of that kind of thing, as well as plank, which is far more useful than most people realize, as long as you're really bracing and holding that strong core position. We should also make sure at this point to try and incorporate movements that we're going to be using during our advanced calisthenics training. This is stuff that you might not normally be training, such as those elbow tendons. Weak elbow tendons can lead to injury if you're trying to do movements like rope climbing or like planche, all really cool stuff that we want to be able to incorporate into a real superhero meta-human training program. So you can incorporate some straight arm positions such as the crow pose, as well as support holds on the rings. Other good moves are rings turned out push-ups, also on the gymnastic rings, or you can use pseudo planche push-ups. Whilst we're on the calisthenics segment, I also recommend toughening up your fingers, which you can do through a whole range of things. I made a video on that also, using a fingerboard and your grip strength, and doing a bit of explosive plyometric work in there for good measure. And the last thing you want to focus on as you build your foundations for this training is your work capacity. Work capacity is your ability to perform exercise for a long period of time without burning out. The more you can train without getting tired, the greater work volume you can accomplish, and the faster you'll see that progress. And if you look at Batman's training program, the one that was shared in the Batman files, you'll see that it involves an insane amount of pure work, as you would have to include if you were trying to train in such a cross-modal manner. There are lots of things you can do to increase work capacity, and again I made a whole video on this in the past, but one of my favourite methods comes from The World's Fittest Book by Ross Edgley, and this is called workhorse training. And this is to include a cardio finisher at the end of each workout, but to make it a form of resistance cardio. That means that you're not only exerting yourself in an aerobic fashion, but you're also pushing or pulling against some form of resistance. So examples might be running up a steep hill, cycling on a tough resistance setting, rowing machine, better yet battle ropes, kettlebell swings, heavy bag work, anything like that that gets your heart pumping but still also targets the muscles and gets them working too. And all of this should help you to get the best start possible and to train in a manner that goes beyond being merely functional. I personally put all of this into a 4-day routine, that being push, pull, legs. You'll be able to find an example linked in the description down below over at thebioneer.com. So hope you found this video useful and interesting, guys. If you did, then please leave a like, please share it around, please subscribe to the channel. All of that helps me out immensely. Like I say, we're getting closer to 100,000 subscribers, and when that happens, I've got some really interesting announcements to make, so stay tuned for that. Thanks so much for all of your support, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye for now.